All right, welcome back to Lost for Words with Lori. It is Monday. It is the 24th of April. I hope everyone had a great weekend and they don't have the Monday blues, or it isn't a blue Monday, or it's not a rainy day or Monday, depending on what part of the country you are in. It is cold and clear here in the southeast United States. But it is Monday nonetheless. So I'm getting ready to have a grueling, busy week. I have a lot on my plate, but I kind of wanted to, I don't know, unwrap something that kind of occurred yesterday that is got me thinking, and it's a little deep and dark and insightful, I guess, about, just some things that have happened. So let me back up just a bit to the weekend and the fact that, my weekends have been super busy, filled with lots of adventures with my new human, my paramour that I spend most of my time with. And we've had a good weekend. And we had planned to go meet some friends and have, a social gathering yesterday afternoon at one of his friends' places. And we got there and found out that there was going to be a charity event that they were doing for a little girl who was in the hospital with leukemia. And of course, being, that we're part of this group, or he's part of this group, I should say, was asked if, we wanted to attend and support that, in which we chose to do. And so it was pretty awesome, feeling really good. I've done community service most of my life. I'm no stranger to doing that thing where you support, other groups, or you do charity things, or do visits, or do things for children or other people or other groups, no matter what they may be, social or private or public or whatever. So yeah, that was great, and getting excited to support that cause. And I was really excited about it, to be asked to participate, to be involved, and to go along for that ride. So fast forward to the actual event itself, and we traveled to a hospital here locally in the southeast, and brought gifts and fellowship, and came to meet this little girl who was in the hospital. And up to the point of arriving there, everything seemed fine. It was really good. Everybody was positive and excited. And then, we broke into smaller groups so that they could step in and visit this little girl in her hospital room. And of course, rules being what they are, in, groups of 4 or 5 or 3 or whatever it was. And everyone was asked, to, if they wanted to go in and visit, to which I declined, only because, well, number one, I didn't know her personally. And number two, I was just kind of standing back and just being there to support the cause, really. But I was on top of the parking ramp with all of our group of people, and having conversations with another person who was there, and we were talking about their experience with cancer and with hospitals, and her decisions for not wanting to go in either. And I started to feel a certain way that I really can't describe, and I was overcome with emotion, and I shed a few tears listening to her story, because I could feel and understand the pain and the sacrifice that she went through for her family, and how terribly difficult that journey and that path for her in her lifetime was. And I was able to let that pass real quickly, and then started to feel this deep, overwhelming sense of pain and sorrow that I just couldn't pinpoint, and I couldn't shake. And it was real heavy, and I felt that pain in my throat and that lump in my throat and that pain in my chest and this overwhelming feeling of sadness. And it hurt. And then as I started to try to maybe breathe through that or get over that really quickly, it intensified. And I felt like it was a very good possibility that I was having a trigger of my PTSD. I mean, if you think about it, less than 2 years ago, I was in a situation where I was having to spend time in the hospital, or not even be allowed to go to the hospital while Toby lied there dying. And all of a sudden, I just sobbed. I couldn't stop crying. And I started to think and I started to feel, and it really hurt. And it stuck with me and it was hard. So as the afternoon is winding down, or evening as I should say, because at this time it's early evening, we had left the event and I was getting ready to go home. And my friend, my paramour, my boyfriend had asked me if I was okay. And I said, listen, we'll talk about this later. I just kind of need to just not be here. And I went home. And I tried to figure out where those emotions and those feelings were coming from. Being surrounded by people in a place where there's so much suffering and there's so much trauma and there's so much pain really did trigger those emotions and those feelings that I wasn't really prepared for in that moment. And I kind of froze. And I really didn't know how to react. And I just knew that I needed time to try to wrap my brain around it, to try to process it, to try to identify it, only because I had no idea. It came out of nowhere. And I just really couldn't stop feeling the emotions. And there was no rational thought with that. It was just pain. And it was sorrow. And it was sad. And all I could really do was just cry. And feel that grief again. That is the bitch about having PTSD and having trauma and not being prepared or know how to react when a trigger hits you, and not understanding where it's coming from, and not being in a place where you feel safe. Or I'm not saying I felt unsafe, but not knowing the people that you're with to be able to unwrap that and talk it through was terrifying to me. And I just felt like I wanted to get out. I wanted to leave. I wanted to hide. And that wasn't possible in that moment. And so I struggled. I struggled all afternoon with that. When I was finally able to get home into, my safe space, into my place where I feel okay and grounded, and tried to really sort it out and think about it, it was a whole lot of jumbled emotions. It was a lot of grief and sorrow and pain, not just for the suffering that people go through dying of cancer and other diseases that seem politicized and are only about money, but also grieving my own loss and feeling that pain of knowing that, not so long ago, that was in my life. That was how I was feeling. I was sitting waiting for the love of my life to die, and I was helpless. And I think to be fair, that's what a lot of this is about, is that feeling of being helpless. I can't help that little girl. I couldn't help Toby. I can't help anybody who's suffering. And I hate that. I hate feeling like I can't do anything and I have no control, and that I can't fix the things that are wrong. And it's not my fault, but it still hurts the same. And trying to unwrap all of that in a moment when everything seemed okay and you felt good about helping, to go from that to feeling defeated and lost and scared is really hard. It's hard to navigate. It's hard to feel good or normal or anything other than just freeze. I felt scared and lost and very alone in that moment, and not because of anything that anyone else did, but just because that's how I felt, and once I was able to unwrap some of that and feel some of that and maybe get out a little bit more of those emotions that I really still am not sure that I can identify, and I was able to calm down, and try to just center and ground, myself in a better place, for that moment, and be grateful that I did have somebody to talk it out with. Not the entire piece of it, but other people who were there were feeling that too. They were feeling that sadness, that pain, that grief for this little girl who's fighting for her life in the hospital with, possibly terminal cancer. To be able to understand that I wasn't alone in that feeling, but for me, it's more about trying to figure out, I guess, on my path, on my journey, about what triggers me and how I am to cope with those things when they happen, because I don't have any control over when the triggers come, when they get flipped. I know in my past I've been driving down the road and seen a street sign, and all of a sudden a memory or something would flood into my brain, and it would trigger that episode, and it would make me cry, or it would make me sad, or it would make me hurt. And I have to figure out in that split second moment how I was going to cope with it. Sometimes a song will come on the radio that will trigger a really intense or strong emotion, and we feel that, and we will cry, or we will laugh, or we will do, whatever that emotion is triggered. And that happens with no willy-nilly. There's no reason or rhyme to it. It could happen on your best day. It could happen on your worst day. I wasn't having a worst day to be triggered by that. But it makes sense. I was at the hospital, the same hospital chain of the one that Toby died at. And all I could think of was the pain of my loss and how sad that other people have to experience it too. And I think it was just a huge feeling of helplessness that kind of made me weep. And I couldn't stop. Once it started, the floodgates were open. I couldn't stop. And I still feel that way. I still feel like, why? Why is it that I can't just navigate life without these moments that trigger things, and then you just can't stop them? And that's the reality of the situation, is that's just life. And I talk a lot about how our past doesn't define us, and we can't allow it to dictate our future. But sometimes I struggle with that, because when triggers happen, you have no control over that. And that's part of your past. It's not defining my future, but it's defining that moment. And all of that pain comes flooding back. And I guess for me, it was just very overwhelming. It was something that I didn't expect. And I was very grateful for the presence of the humans that were with me, because I didn't feel judgment. But I still felt terrified, and I still felt scared. And I still wanted to hide, because I don't think it's anything to be ashamed of. But I guess in that moment I felt shame. Why should I be so upset? Why should I be feeling these emotions? It's a lot to unwrap, and
it's really difficult to do so when you're in freeze mode and you just want to hide. But I really struggled, and I struggled hard, and I struggled the most of the evening, because I just wanted to stop. I didn't want to feel that pain. I didn't want to feel the lump in my throat or the pain in my heart. I just wanted it to go away. And I don't ever want to have to feel this way, but I don't have a choice. It just comes. And I'm still struggling to figure out what to do next time, because I know that I don't have any control over those emotions when they come. But when you're in that moment, how do you shut the switch? How do you turn off the light until you're in a place or a space where you can unwrap all of that? And I guess that's something that I can discuss with my therapist when I see her next week. Because I've been on such a high, and my momentum has been so positive and good and forward. It's almost like hitting a brick wall, and wondering if that's, life's way of telling you to slow down or to stop, and pay attention to whatever it is that's going on in that moment. And I'm trying really hard to do that without feeling guilt. Because I feel like I'm still honoring Toby every day, by being alive and by talking about him and about living my best life for him, with someone else, and with my friends, and moving forward and succeeding with my future with no guilt, because there shouldn't be any. And wondering if there is any. I think one of the problems that we all have is that we overthink things to try to find a plausible explanation to fit or give accountability to our feelings. And I just can't do that today. And I couldn't do it last night. I couldn't give any plausibility or any, I don't know, validation to how I was feeling, than to just acknowledge that's how I felt. And sometimes I think I'm supposed to just accept it. And I think that's the hardest part about all of it, is as I learn and grow and evolve and change and get through all of these traumas, is the acceptance piece is the hardest part. I'm not in denial. I'm not angry. I get angry. But it's stepping over that threshold of acceptance that this is just the way it is, and there isn't a fucking thing I can do about it. But being who I am, I always want to be able to fix it or change it or make it not hurt so much. But the reality of the fact is it still hurts. And I don't know if that pain will ever go away. And I hate that. I hate feeling like I'm looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next trigger or for the next moment that I can't control, and still not allow that to terrify me or scare me into stopping the positive movement and all of the good things that are going on in my world. And that's a really tough thing to look at. It's a tough thing to even think for somebody like me right now. But I wanted to show you the real side of what I think, of what I feel. It's not all unicorns and butterflies in the world. It's not always happy. And that sometimes the days are dark and the hard times come. And you have to try to figure out ways to cope, to unwrap, to feel, and to move on to the next right thing, as my therapist calls it. And the next right thing is for me to just keep growing, keep learning, keep listening, keep feeling, and keep sharing with you. And I appreciate everybody who takes the time. Let me know what you think. If you have any situations where you've been triggered into an emotion by past trauma, and how you coped with it, how you dealt with it. I learned a lot from hearing other people's experiences, and I'd hope to hear some more. Um, and that's why I think I share with you guys. You've all walked along this journey with me for such a long time, and watched everything unfold. Um, and I couldn't be more grateful. So thanks for being there. Thank you to the people who invited me to attend these events and make my heart feel good about assisting others who are in pain and suffering. And thanks to my most amazing human boyfriend who listens, doesn't judge, and just holds my hand while I walk through all of this tough stuff that he can't fix or control either. But he listens without judgment and he cares. And I think that was wonderful to be able to have somebody in real time to literally ask if you need a hug and just listen. And that to me is priceless. Thanks, you guys. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Mine is going to be a little chaotic. I will catch you up next week. Don't forget to wash your fucking hands. Be a good human. Love you guys.